In today's episode, I am joined again by sex therapist and educator Tammy Hill. We have a very real conversation all about sex that feels very needed in our LDS community. We answered your submitted questions about waiting until marriage, how to orgasm, masturbation, what's on or off limits according to church policy, and ways to teach our kids to be both sex positive and sexually pure. Honestly, nothing was off limits. We talk about the awkward and maybe misunderstood parts of intimacy that deserve more clarity and less shame in our culture. The goal for this episode is to help all of us feel more confident and connected with this part of our lives. But just a heads up, it's pretty spicy and I wouldn't listen to it with children around. But welcome to Blonde Apologist. Well, hello everybody and welcome to a new episode. We are in for a treat because we are joined again by Tammy Hill. Welcome, Tammy.
Hello, Lauren. I'm excited to be here.
We are so happy that you're here. I had so many listeners message me that they were excited that Tammy was coming back. So if you're not familiar with Tammy, I took Tammy's marriage prep class at BYU and it changed my life.
Thank you.
And I've had her on the podcast before. We talked about our sexual theology and just kind of trying to break some of the taboo in our faith and have a better relationship with sexuality or with sex. And today we're going to do a little bit more of that. But instead of me guiding the questions, I had listeners submit so many wonderful questions.
Yes.
And Tammy comes well prepared as a sex educator and therapist. Is there anything you want to say about yourself before we get started?
No, I'm excited to be here. I host the Live Your Why podcast. I did the last episode, recorded that last week because my husband and I will be leaving on a mission to BYU, Hawaii. So we're wrapping kind of that part of my life up.
Yeah.
I'm still on Instagram, and I think if your followers want, or if your listeners want to follow me, that would be great, at Tammy_Hill_LMFT. Unfortunately, because I'm a sex educator, I've been flagged on and off for about 3 years, my account, and it gets pretty frustrating when you're trying to teach and educate around really important principles and things get flagged. So
yeah, it's sad because you're trying to create better conversations around it and make it a safer thing to talk about, and you get flagged for trying to bring it up at all, which is interesting. So yeah, go follow Tammy. Let's give her some love. And she's not going to be at BYU anymore, so she'll be at BYU Hawaii. Is that right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So everyone needs to move to BYU Hawaii so you can take her classes if you're a student. Okay, Tammy, I got so many questions. It took me days to go through all of your questions.
Yeah.
And I just want people to know, like, if we didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. Like, I love you, and I read them all, and I wish we could get to all of them, but I did take away some big themes, and I'm going to ask questions that can answer a lot of the concerns that I saw coming in the responses that I had. I also don't want to repeat a lot of our conversation from last time, so if we don't get to your question, maybe it was answered in the last episode. But what I was thinking for today is we can start with some questions about before marriage and then newlywed life, and then we'll go into talking about like sex drive and connection, and then I want to end on talking about teaching our children about these things. So, does that sound good to you?
Perfect.
So starting with those couples who are not married yet, not engaged and dating and trying to live a chaste life, this person asked, how can we explore ourselves sexually and have the conversations needed with a partner, fiance before marriage so that we feel prepared, confident, and on the same page with expectations, but in a way that aligns with our beliefs and keeps everything sacred and not going too far?
Yeah, that's such a perfect question, and that is my entire curriculum for marriage prep. Not entirely, but a lot of it. And I think this is a question most of us have. I know I did before I got married, and you probably did before you got married. And so I wrote a book 2 years ago called Replenish, and the first 2 sections of that book I think are really important for couples before they're married to start discussing. And it's all about, first of all, the theology, which we did on the last episode. And then the second section talks about our beliefs and attitudes regarding sexuality and understanding where they come from. And so many of the questions that you forwarded to me, I like to teach principles as much as I can. And the principle is you get to choose as a couple what your sex life looks like. It's your choice, and it's only your choice. It isn't your mother's sex life. It isn't your bishop's sex life. It isn't your young woman's or your young men's leader's sex life. It is your sex life, and it's really important for couples to understand. You might think you don't have any prejudices or issues around sexuality until you start going through the questions in my book about what about this? What about this? Because we've all been nurtured in an environment where we learn about sex, and we bring that with us into our marriage. And then when we're together, married, if we've talked about all those beliefs and we understand where each other's coming from, the transition to sex just becomes so much more friendly. It's about you understand what it means to both of you, and that's a huge thing in sex therapy. Yeah. What does this type of touch mean to you? And that's something no one ever teaches us to think about. And so if you are able to really go through and have those fundamental beliefs understood with one another, it's going to really help you in that transition to becoming sexual together. I also have I have a lot of courses online, tammyhill.com, where you can go through. I have a honeymoon workshop where it's about 2 hours where I sit down and teach couples who are getting married soon or newlywed couples about sexual beliefs and then the transition to being sexual together.
Yeah. I think it's so important to be educated, and I feel like in our faith it's common to like walk into marriage completely blinded and not really know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And you have ideas of what sex is, you know what it is maybe, but it's still can be so challenging, and so also it can feel awkward. But if you have these conversations beforehand, you're more comfortable and you go in with more confidence.
Right, and understanding each other. I know there's the cliche that silence is golden, and I always say silence is not golden in the bedroom. You have to talk, and sex is intended, another principle, sex is intended to be relational. It's intended to be shared in a marriage relationship, and in order to really have that be as fulfilling as both of you want it to be, you have to be able to understand yourself and express yourself and listen to understand your spouse and really do the work to communicate about it. So I meet with couples all the time for sex therapy, and even as early as 8-9 months, they're coming to want to see me post-marriage. And then people have been married for years. And one of the issues could easily be solved if they were to be able to visit about these things before, talk about these things before they get married. And you usually have ideas. There tends to be one partner that's more adventurous in the bedroom than the other, and that's normal and okay. But the adventurous person needs to kind of identify, why is this behavior important for me to experience? What's driving it? And when you sit down and start thinking, where did this idea come from? Sometimes it's come from porn, sometimes it's come from conversations you had with girlfriends or boyfriends, or you learned at a bridal shower or a bachelorette party or something. Where is this coming from? And the person that tends to be less adventurous, why are you resistant to trying it? Where did those messages come from? Because when you're married, I always say there should be no ghosts in the bedroom. That includes the things you heard at that bachelorette party or the things your mother told you. They're not invited into what you choose to do together. And so keep those voices at bay and then really get down to the nuts and bolts of, why is this important to me and what does it mean to me? Before, if you talk about some of those things before you get married, there's just going to be so much smooth transition once you are married.
That's good advice. What about, I actually want to ask another question kind of in this area for people who are dating or engaged. Like, how can they know what boundaries to set, like physical boundaries to set, not in a way that's pushing the line, but more like showing respect to our covenants and the Lord, but also wanting to express love to their partner. How can people know and feel confident in the boundaries they're setting?
I love this question because I think it involves, first of all, understanding your own sexual arousal. When I know I'm getting sexually aroused, I understand what's happening to my body. And when my fiance was getting aroused, he would know what was going on with his body. And so you can tell when you're becoming really aroused and when you need to stop. And at that point, you just say, hey, we need to change this up. We both want to be totally worthy to be married and to honor the covenants that we've made. And so I'm getting too aroused. And I will often have people say, I don't think I can say that. That's too embarrassing. And my answer to that is, if you're too embarrassed to talk about this, you certainly shouldn't be doing it. When you understand what happens to your body when you're aroused and you recognize that you're getting aroused, that should be a signal for you to stop.
That's perfect, because I feel like people want you to tell them what the line is. And I've had people ask that before and ask me and Tanner that. And it's like, I feel that if you are two people who are trying to get to the temple and you have the Spirit with you, do things to bring the Spirit into your life every day, like you're going to know where the line is. Like you're going to be able to protect each other. And honestly, like I feel like the times where he would be like, okay, we need to slow down or we need to stop, I was so grateful. That made me love him more.
Exactly.
And so don't be embarrassed to say that. Like, Shay, like, I respect you and love you so much, and like, let's just slow down and go for a walk.
I love that. And I believe what that really establishes is so much trustworthiness. Trustworthiness comes from you do what you say you're going to do, or you do what you say you believe in. And if you believe this is important, then you're willing to say, hey, I need to stop. And that trustworthiness foundation in marriage is the root of being able to sexually expand together as a couple. If it's not there, you're not going to have expansive, mind-blowing sex.
Okay, that's so cool. Anything else you want to share on these thoughts?
I want to say, empathize. I understand arousal, and it's enjoyable. And I don't want people to feel like that we're so far removed from that season of life that we don't remember it. I remember it. It's fun to kiss and make out, and you do want to do more, and you love each other, and all those feelings are really real, and they're healthy, and it's a really beautiful part about being human. I think I want to acknowledge the enjoyment of it, at the same time making sure that you recognize wisdom always has to trump enjoyment. And always wisdom has to trump it. And so remember to be wise even in the midst of the fun.
And you'll be grateful for it.
Forever. Forever.
In the long run. Yeah, I know too, like sometimes when we've had this culture of like everything sexual is so bad that I know girls who felt so naughty, I guess you could say. They felt guilty for doing stuff that they didn't necessarily need to feel guilty for, because they were aroused. And in some ways, I want to just say like, hey, if you stopped, like that is so good. But it's also good to know that you were aroused, and like you will make great sex partners in the future because of this connection and this chemistry that you have. And you don't need to see it as this issue. One girl messaged me and she was like, I feel like we crossed the line, and it makes me wonder sometimes like if we're really meant to be together. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a sign that you're not meant to be together. That's right. Means there's a lot of chemistry there.
And that can be a great strength in your relationship. Also, with that question though, realizing that you love this so much, so make a plan. Make a plan to, if you really truly don't want to cross the line, or the lines you're coming to arouse, you need to respect one another enough to make new plans.
So that you can get there to the temple. All right, I love that. Going forward to talking about newlyweds for a second. This person asked, she said, it feels bad to masturbate as a female, but I get stuck trying to tell my husband what feels good to me because I genuinely don't know. Is there a positive way to explore our bodies and not feel shame?
Yes. Your body is your body, period. You are the only one that will know what it feels best for you. You're the only one that can experiment and learn what feels best for you. I had so many thoughts on this question. There is no shaming. I believe there's no shame in understanding how your body works. I think if this person or if this whoever is listening is struggling to feel sexual arousal, take the time to set the tone for yourself, to set the stage with lighting or music, or get in the shower and learn to touch yourself, so that not with the idea that this is going to be a selfish thing, but this is an idea that you're going to be able to learn what you like so you can show your spouse what it is you like. This is an intervention I use all the time in sex therapy. Especially in highly religious and conservative cultures, many women don't know how to orgasm. This is something I see often in therapy, and they feel so guilty if they touch themselves. And I think it's so important. Men have it easy in some ways and very hard in another because their genitalia is all external. They've learned from young boys what feels nice. Mm-hmm. As young women, girls, we don't have that. We don't have that privilege, and we don't have that responsibility. There's kind of a pro and con on both ends. We kind of have to look and figure it out. And for you to be able to figure that out on your own, and so that you can help him help you enjoy that pleasure, I think is so important. Another piece to that is I had a question on Instagram just like 2 weeks ago about wondering, is it okay to masturbate during sex? So I think touching yourself when you're alone and doing this for a selfish reason, and you're viewing pornography even maybe while you're doing that, is not wise. It's not respecting your body. It's not respecting your covenants. When you're touching yourself alone so that you can enhance the experience that you're sharing with your spouse and help him know how to help you, that isn't masturbation to me. I call that sexual self-discovery, and I think it's essential. When you are together and you touch yourself, that's just part of sex. That isn't masturbation. Mm-hmm. Sexual pairing is a term in sex education, which when you're having penetrative sex and you need to reach down, or your partner needs to reach down, or maybe with a toy or a finger or whatever to help you continue with your clitoral gland stimulation to continue up to the orgasm threshold, that's okay, and that's perfectly normal. That's mm-hmm. sexual pairing, and it's essential that you know that that's okay. It really, doing sexual pairing, learning about yourself and pleasure really shrinks the orgasm gap. And I wanted to just talk about that for a moment, if I can, Lauren.
Yeah.
The orgasm gap in the United States, when a man has sex, and this is in relational sex, heterosexual relationship sex, he orgasms and ejaculates about 90% of the time, every time he has sex. Women, on average, orgasm 58% of the time. Do you see the difference there?
Yeah.
90 to 58. And that's not where we're not created not to have that pleasure together. We need to understand as women that how to feel good and how to help our husbands help us feel good. That's just a huge gap that we need to shrink. And the way to shrink it is with education, communication, and experimentation.
Amen. Education, experimentation, communication. It's interesting because when I think back to our early days, which hopefully Tanner's not embarrassed by me talking about this, but I get where she's coming from, where she said, like, I feel shame touching myself. I feel like I was uncomfortable touching myself, but I remember hearing this from taking your class. I was more comfortable doing it with Tanner, mm-hmm. and that was how we learned together. And I'm grateful that he was patient, and like it was something that he wanted me to enjoy as well. Mm-hmm. And so Yeah, experiment together. Can maybe if you're uncomfortable doing it by yourself. I also don't feel like I can get aroused by myself, as what I learned as I was doing what I had learned from your class. It took being with him, and so
Sure.
yeah, experiment, and then communication, right? Is like as soon as something's feeling good or feeling right, like expressing it and telling them.
Keep going, don't stop.
I got so many comments about women struggling to orgasm.
Yeah.
And some women not even sure if they knew what it was.
Right.
And so maybe we should explain that for a second and talk about that.
Okay. I wanted to just mention, because a lot of your listeners would also be people that would want to join this community. I have a community I started last year. It's called TLC, Touch, Love, and Connect. And it's a $10 a month subscription. And on the first Tuesday of every month, I teach a sexual lesson. And then you have access to that recording to learn from. This month that I taught last week was about his pleasure, learning how he experiences pleasure. I think it's in August or September of this year, I have the whole entire one is on learning to orgasm. And so I've just made lessons up for love. I call them love-making lessons. And you can go on my website under couples resources, click on that, and then go down to lovemaking lessons and scroll through it. There's so many lovemaking lessons there that will help you understand what about vibrators? What about menopause and desire? What about, there's just so many things there that you can access for $10 to learn from. I really believe that educating yourself is important. Orgasm. There's a lot of pressure in the Western world to orgasm. That sex is about orgasm, and that you haven't really had sex unless you have orgasmed. And that pressure isn't helpful, and it's false. I even got a question this morning, I just answered this morning on Instagram, where a woman wrote in that if she doesn't orgasm, or if her husband loses his erection during the time that they're together, they both feel like they failed and sex isn't fun anymore. That's so sad to me when we put so much pressure on ourselves. It makes sex a goal. Like we have to do this, and this order in order to orgasm. And if we don't orgasm, this was a waste of our time. It was just, we're losers, whatever they say to themselves. And I want to take the pressure off of orgasm-focused sex for just a minute and learn that sometimes being together naked, touching, exploring, just feeling happy, kissing can be so fulfilling. And it doesn't need to lead to any type of penetrative sex or orgasm. And so take advantage of the times that you can not make it about that. Maybe my husband, Jeff, will be a little embarrassed if I...
We'll have to play this for them before we go live, folks.
But we'll be honest with you that sometimes in order to kind of make things more fun for us again, we have a week where we designate it to just being boyfriend and girlfriend. And that whole week we decide we're not going to have sex this week. We're going back to boyfriend and girlfriend, and it's so fun. We actually did this 2 weeks ago, and Jeff was so cute. He left lilacs in my car. He had a love note under my pillow. There were so many things, and we made out. Yeah. We made out like we used to make out before we got married, and it was so fun. And so by the time the week was over, I'll tell you, we had really great sex, and it was so much fun because we postponed and backed up and
built some anticipation.
Right, and we put some of that energy back into our relationship about us just having fun together. And so go back to that. If you're really starting to feel like this is becoming a chore, go back to just having some fun together that way and let it build up.
Okay, I agree, and I love what you're saying. Like, take some of the pressure off that it doesn't have to be orgasm focused. But for the women who have never orgasmed, who want to experience that,
right, for sure,
what advice would you give to them?
First of all, I want you to know you're not broken.
Yeah.
Hear that loud and clear, because you all that I've ever worked with feel like you're broken, and you are not. And so that's the very first thing that I wanted to make sure you all hear. You're not broken. Let me tell you what an orgasm, first of all, requires. It requires time. It requires friction. It requires heat. All of those three things increase blood volume into the clitoral complex. And get replenished, please, and read a little bit more about all of that. I would love to do a podcast on female sexual history sometime, because that gives such understanding as to why women don't understand about their bodies. And it's not because you're broken, it's because no one had information to teach you about this.
Yes.
The clitoral complex was identified in 2014. That was 11 years ago. We knew about the clitoral glands, but we didn't know about all the other parts of it. And it was in 2022 that we understood about the entire female G zone. There are a lot of parts within your body that can be arousing and that have orgasmic capabilities. And learning about these parts of your body and talking about this with your spouse and working together, communicating while he's touching and helping you, it will be so beneficial to you. I do Making Love retreats. These are all recorded now because I'm leaving on my mission, but the level 2 Making Love retreat, the last lesson is all about learning about female ejaculation. And so if these are things that you want to learn about, I have such affordable resources for you on my website. Please check them out. Mm-hmm. But so what we're doing is with the heat, friction, and time is we're getting blood volume to the entire clitoral complex. So inside the clitoral complex, just inside the inner thigh, up and around the pubic bone under the pelvic nerve, over to this other inner thigh is roughly 11 inches in length. This whole area has to be filled completely engorged with blood in order for orgasm to take place. You can get close. You're almost there, and then if it's not all the way there, it's not anything that you're doing. It's just that there needs more time, more friction, maybe more heat in order to get that. And so be patient with yourselves while you're learning this. On average, women take 42 minutes. On average, that means you've got outliers on both sides, right? On average, it takes women 42 minutes without a vibrator to orgasm.
Wow. That is longer than I would have thought.
It's much longer. For men, it's about 7.
Okay, so that leads me to a question that I thought was really interesting, and I want to hear if you have thoughts on it. She said, why did Heavenly Father design it to be so hard for women to orgasm?
I have thought about this for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about sex so many hours of my life, and I've wondered about that myself. And so I have come, and I encourage you to think about it too. What kind of feelings and answers? I don't believe there are any mistakes in the way that we've been created. There is purpose behind everything. If we think about the common differences between men and women sexually, pacing is huge. Like I said, 6 to 7 minutes on average for an orgasm and ejaculation for men. They're not the same thing. And 41 to 42 minutes for women without a vibrator. Okay? That's a big difference. Women need emotional connection and safety in order to relax enough to have sex. Men, on the other hand, need to have sex in order to feel that emotional connection. Mm-hmm. Another difference that I think is huge is that for women, we are multitaskers. All of us, we have at any given time. How many times do you think in this moment, in 1 minute, I've thought about probably 15 things I need to do. And in the back of my mind, I already know there's laundry in the dryer. I need to make lunch for them tomorrow. Or, there's just so many things going on. Men don't have brains like that. One of my podcasts, on the Live Your Way podcast, is called How to Love a Man. And it's all about the difference between men and women's brains. Well, our brains are the biggest sex organs. And so if you have a man that's not multitasking and his brain's engaged, you can see why this happens so quickly for him, right? On the other hand, a woman, it takes time for us to get all the way there, to bring our head to bed. And so the more that your spouse can help you put away as many loose ends as possible before you come to bed so that you can fully engage, that's going to be very helpful too. So those are the three big differences between men and women sexually: the brains, emotional connection, and pacing. Why do I feel like they're different? I believe we are intentionally different because we're here to learn to complete each other. And as women, we need to have more patience with ourselves. As men, they need to have more patience with the timing. I think it requires us to communicate and truly become one when we work together to make this a priority in our marriage. That's why if you can, before marriage, go through so many of those fundamental questions and really process those, you're going to be in a place of being able to have this connection and a lot more satisfying sex, and it won't feel frustrating because he gets to be aroused and go so much quicker than you can. Mm-hmm. And men, I will say this is so redeeming to me. In the research, and this is universally, so everywhere in the world, men, their number one thing they find arousing and fulfilling about sex is providing sexual pleasure for their spouse. Mm-hmm. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I've heard that.
And so if, as women, we can understand it's easy for them to become aroused, but what really creates a lot of arousal for them and pleasure for them is seeing that they're creating that for us, then give it. Let him give that to you. I think we have a hard time as women letting that happen.
Yeah, I think so too.
We're used to giving, like, what's our service list? Who are we giving to today? And sometimes it's hard for us to sit back and just be given to. And so we need to be better at doing that.
Oh, so good. Someone's just asked, she's like, how do I know if I have orgasm? Does it look a certain way for everyone?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair question. So when the blood volume totally, biological homology, that men and women are really genitalia is very similar, women's internal, men's external. And so when the penis has to be fully engorged and for a man to be able to orgasm and ejaculate, and the same with the clitoral complex for a woman, once that clitoral complex is fully engorged, the arousal threshold has reached the orgasm threshold, and there begins to be pleasurable involuntary contractions that last for about 20 seconds on average, and it's all throughout the whole pelvic floor. And it's very, very pleasurable. And afterwards, you feel relaxed. There's not tension, there's relaxation. And so a lot of times you will start moaning or making sounds that are unfamiliar to you, and maybe you feel shocked or embarrassed by those. Let those out. That's a way you're expressing pleasure. And I know several times in therapy, I've had women stop themselves because they don't like the way they sound in an orgasm, and they're embarrassed about that, and that makes me so sad.
Yeah.
That's something so natural coming out of you, and it's absolutely driving your husband wild, hearing those sounds. And so let that enjoyment, you're designed for pleasure. Women have more possibility for sexual pleasure than men do, and so embrace that goodness. It's a good part of being alive.
And that was the whole last episode, is really trying to embrace that and just being grateful for the way that we were created.
Exactly.
What the comment you just made really leads into this question under the culture and taboos.
Okay.
She said, I feel like women in the church have trouble feeling sexy or trying to be sexy because it almost feels like a sin to be. But I think it's important in a relationship to own your sexuality. Thoughts on this and how to go about it in a healthy, appropriate way?
Love this question. I think often in religious cultures, we feel like if we're not spiritual, if we're sexy.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Those are two parts of who you are. There's a internal family systems theory as a theory in therapy where you start picking apart yourself and identifying different parts of who you are. Not like you have multiple personalities, but there's different parts of who you are. Like I'm Tammy, and I'm the sex therapist. I'm Tammy. I'm also happen to be really great at watercoloring. I'm Tammy, who loves to be the the teacher. I'm Tammy that likes to go out and play pickleball. There's a lot of parts of me, and I have to make room for all of them so that we embrace the whole us. So maybe this listener can think a little bit about, this is a part of you that needs to be embraced, and welcome to the family, this internal family systems theory. Welcome all parts of yourself to your whole you, and learn more about this part of yourself, showing your spouse this sexual part of yourself, how you feel it. Find ways maybe to connect to your body. If you're feeling like you disengage from the sexual part when you're sexually active with your spouse, because there could be some trauma that you need to work through. If there is any type of sexual trauma, even back from dating trauma, and it doesn't need to necessarily be rape. It can be that someone pressured you a little farther than you thought you were going to go, and you've got jarring from that. The EMDR therapy is something I highly recommend for anyone that's had any type of sexual trauma. Sometimes we exclude or we disengage ourselves from the sexual part when there's been any type of trauma, and in EMDR we bring that part back in and it heals our brain so that we can enjoy that part of ourselves again.
It's beautiful that we can be healed and fully to enjoy it the way that it was intended to.
Yeah. I think one more thought I had on this is sensuality. We're sensual beings. If you stop for a minute and think, what happens if we never tasted any flavors, or we never smelled any smells, or we only had one color to see? It's just crazy. The variety that we have on the earth created for us, along with the variety of sensual messages that we get with our bodies, makes us such sensual beings. And it's okay to enjoy pleasure. It's okay to feel what it is your skin's feeling in the moment. It's okay to take a minute and make sure that we are connecting to our senses. I think going back to the question about, is it righteous or is it a good part of ourselves to have this sexual piece? Yes, it is. And I think if you start embracing all of the sensual experiences that you have around you, recognizing that sex can be sensual this way too, it might make it a little easier for that integration.
Yeah, and I hope that at least just hearing that you have permission, and it's what our heavenly parents want for us, like, can help take away some of the shame and some of the embarrassment. This is something that you're working through, like, you can even make it a spiritual matter in that sense.
Totally pray to ask to be able to accept that sexual part of yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Wholeheartedly. Also in that question, if there's feelings of guilt underlying it, that if I turn, I'll be very honest, sometimes I'm getting older, and sometimes it's harder for me to get aroused as quickly as it used to be when I was younger. And so sometimes I know that Jeff and I will be able to be together sometime in the next few hours, and I'll shower, I'll put on lingerie, and then put my clothes on over my lingerie. And the reason is I'm wearing this lingerie for me. I like this. The fabrics are silky. They make me feel sexy and sensual. I also have this anticipation that when I like maybe nudge my shoulder and he just sees a little strap there instead of my garments, he's going to think, oh, what's going on there? You know, there's just a lot of that we can tune into this sexual part of ourselves without feeling guilty. I don't think it's one end or the other. They're not polar opposites.
Yeah.
At all.
Agreed, completely.
A couple weeks ago, I did an episode on Live Your Why. I had a woman write in about how do I navigate lingerie with garments. And so if people want to listen into that, it's such a good episode. I've kept my episodes this season really short for my time mostly. But it's been really it's been downloaded frequently, and a lot of people have responded to that.
I actually think my
positively.
neighbor told me to listen to that one.
Did she?
Yeah, because she listens to my podcast. I told her you were coming back on, and she told me that she really liked that one.
Yeah, I liked it too.
So continuing on this conversation of some taboos in our faith, this question was interesting. She said, I have had a hard time with sex ever since listening to Wendy Nelson's talk, Four Truths About Marriage. She states, for true marital intimacy, the Holy Ghost needs to be involved. It made me uncomfy because I see sex offending the spirit, any pleasure offending it. How can the Holy Ghost be present at all?
This is an amazing question. I want to go back to the context of that talk was given to the youth and young adults, single adults. And I believe that in some of the phrasing of that, there's good intention and also maybe a little bit of a fear message. Not that she intended it to be fearful, but there's this fear message that if I do too much, I'm not going to have the Holy Ghost with me. Or and unfortunately, the way really well-intentioned, meaning people in the church have taught about chastity and sexuality has created a lot of fear and shame in people so that they start feeling this is a bad part of who they are, and that simply isn't true. So when I really did think a lot about, and I actually prayed about this question, so I hope I'm going to answer it the way that Heavenly Father would want me to. I believe that there may be moments in sex where they can be intensely spiritual. In my lifetime, there's probably 4 times in my whole life that I know I was also having a very spiritual experience with my spouse. And that's not very many for a whole lot of living, okay? Mm-hmm. And so there can be really intensely spiritual experiences you share sexually. I think going into sex feeling like this has to feel like something spiritual, however, isn't helpful.
Yeah.
It isn't helpful. If we define the Holy Ghost involvement or the purpose of the Holy Ghost is to testify of the certainty of the Father and the Son and of all truth, and to sanctify us in preparation to live with God. That's what was in the church handbook when I just looked up this to prepare for this question. And I thought about that. Can we share this love in marriage, fully giving our erotic selves to one another, and also recognize the goodness and purpose in it and feel that it's true? Can we have this bless our marriage in a way that sanctifies our lives? Absolutely. I believe we can. And so if this is something that's hanging you up, I hope you'll know there might be times in your life that you can have intensely spiritual and sexual experiences sharing them. I believe, however, that the overall umbrella is that between husband and wife, this is an important aspect of marriage that is fully sanctified by the Holy Ghost and by our heavenly parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just is such a blessing. And I feel like that's where the Spirit, like, again, I like what you said. I don't know if I'm thinking now about my experiences with sex in the Spirit. And it's kind of like the scriptures where it's like when I read the scriptures, I rarely have big moments with the Spirit.
Right.
And I have these moments of revelation. It's mostly like, but reading my scriptures daily blesses my life and sets me up for success. And I feel like sex is the same way. Like, I'm not having like these crazy spiritual experiences, but it is bringing my husband and I together in this unity and this just this closeness and confidence in our relationship that I'm so grateful that then like affects the rest of my life and
Absolutely.
The rest of my day.
And it's modeling something really important for your children. They're not seeing you have sex, but they're seeing the goodness that sex is bringing to your life. They're seeing that mom and dad love each other and that they're happy and that this might be something I want to do sometime in my life because that looks kind of like fun to be married.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I feel like that is why I was set to have like a good relationship with sex is because I knew my parents had sex. And it's not in an inappropriate way. I didn't ever see them, but it's like I knew they loved each other. They would tease each other about sex. They were touchy and they weren't afraid to embrace each other around us. And so I knew my parents were in love and I knew at one day I would have sex and it would be beautiful. And I really feel like it set me up. And my parents literally never talked to me about sex. Like they're part of that generation where it was just like we didn't even talk about it. And so I wasn't super well educated, but I still feel like my mentality was so positive because I knew my parents enjoyed it.
Yeah.
In a healthy way.
Yeah. I think my parents might have enjoyed sex. I'm not sure. They're a farther generation that way than your parents are. I do remember as a young child when my dad would sometimes put his arms around my mother in the kitchen and she'd kind of freeze up and push him away. And I remember wondering, does she like him? And I didn't really see them be affectionate a lot. And so I think we're modeling marriage for our children. If you want to, I believe one of the most important things parents can do is model a healthy sexual marriage by the way you interact with each other at home.
Yeah, I agree. At least I'm reaping the benefits of it.
I wanted to go back just for a moment, but I feel like I want to share that one of those really deeply spiritual experiences was truly a gift sexually. Is the last time that my late husband Mark and I made love. I had no idea that it would be the last time we made love. He died very unexpectedly. And I can remember as we're making love, we really were gazing into each other's eyes. And I felt like in this instant, I feel like I saw him. I feel like I saw who he is. And I'll be forever grateful for that experience. And so sometimes it's us taking the moment to really look in each other's eyes that we can really tune into the spiritual aspect of what it is that we're sharing. And it is through the eyes that we see one another's souls. And we're sharing souls. We're not just sharing bodies. And so when you take a moment to really gaze into each other's eyes, this can become truly a bonding experience along with a pleasurable one.
That's really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Intimate moment with us. That made me think of a question someone asked, and I know you've experienced this because you were a widow and now you've remarried, and so you've had two partners throughout your life. And someone asked, how do I not compare myself to his previous partner if they're divorced or widowed or had sexual relationships before marriage? I got a couple questions about that. I struggle with my confidence, and I'm curious how you navigated that.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to that principle that there's no ghosts in the bedroom. And absolutely, Jeff, my husband, now lost his first wife as well. We both had partners that, and we knew how to do sex the way that we knew how to do sex with our other partners. And when we came together, we had to learn a little about how to do sex the way that we were going to do sex. It is different. And what we learned was most helpful for us was not to talk about our past sexual experiences with each other, that wasn't helping what we're creating in the here and now. And so your spouse has chosen you, and be there, be you and be there. Leave other people out, leave other voices, leave other ghosts out. And if it's hard, there's a visualization technique that I use to externalize. And I had to do this for myself because I would feel like I'd compare myself to Juanita, who is Jeff's late wife, sometimes at the first of our marriage. And, not having my therapeutic background, it was easier for me to say, okay, I'm going to externalize this. And so I had a little can. I know this is stupid, but I would just had a little can of corn because she loved cream corn. So I put a can of cream corn outside my bedroom, and I would say, "You're not welcome into this, and you need to stay here." And I would close the door, come into the bedroom, and sometimes when she would maybe come into my mind, I would have to breathe deeply for a moment and say, "Wait a minute, you're outside. I left you outside," and I did that a few times, and it really helped.
That's cool.
Externalize those voices in your mind. They don't need to be there.
Oh, this has been so good, Tammy. Going on to tips about spicing up your sex life. I think this is a good sum up of a lot of the comments I got on this. She says, my husband is the best, our sex life not the best. I feel like he is not as sex motivated as I am. He says no more than yes, and right now we are having sex 1 or 2 times a month when I'm fertile because we are trying for a baby. This makes me feel really insecure and I don't know what to do.
Okay, so your husband is the best. And he wouldn't marry someone that wasn't the best. And so I love that you can see the goodness in your husband, and I hope that you'll pause for a minute and see the goodness in you too. I hope, I don't have any other information about this question to add context. I hope that you've talked with your husband about this and that he's aware of how you're feeling. My husband Mark and I were infertile and did fertility for 13 years. I understand the pain involved with having sex while you're trying to conceive. It becomes about conception and not pleasure. So I'm sorry about that, but I do believe that's probably pretty normal what you're feeling for this season of life where you're trying to conceive. I would ask my husband, if this were me, do you feel pressure when we're having sex? What kind of pressure do you feel? Does he feel pressure that he needs to last really long for you? Does he feel pressure that he needs to make sure that you come before he comes? Or is there some type of pressure that he's feeling about engaging with you sexually? And listen not to get defensive. Listen to really understand what he says. Men in our culture have a lot of pressure, often sexually. They've grown up in a society where men are dominant sexually. They have been instructed how to be more assertive sexually and maybe even more aggressive sexually in their sex lives. And then so when you have a nice gentleman who's grown up in this context and he knows that he's not going to be aggressive or assertive with you, it starts making him feel like maybe he's not as sexual or masculine as he would like to be. So on the Live Your White podcast, sorry I'm referring to my podcast so much, but I've done lots of interviews, and there's one on this male pressure and sexual masculine shame with Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife that I think you could go back and listen to a lot of the details that we talked about this. But I think asking your husband, do you feel pressure in the bedroom, and talk to me about that. Listen to understand and see what are things that you can do to help him feel less pressure. Maybe that's one way I would answer that particular question. I also would answer that there are many layers to libido. People say I'm the low sex drive partner, I'm the low desire, he's the high desire. That's what we most typically hear. It's not always that way. But there's some type of pressure that we have socially to identify which one's high desire and which one's low desire. And I think instead of doing that, we should look at the layers that impact libido, look at exhaustion. I look at my children who are your age, Lauren, and raising little families, and a lot of them have dual careers. Some of them, I have one son that's also in the military, and I look at the stress and exhaustion they have in their lives, and it's so hard to have sex, spontaneous sex, when you're exhausted. And so look at the exhaustion, look at the stress, what's going on in your life that's creating a lot of stress. You need to look at the quality of your relationship. Do you feel like you're really good friends? Do you feel that you have fun together? When's the last time you laughed together and just had a fun time without any talk about the kids or any pressure to talk about finances or things that create some more of the more, taxing conversations? And also hormones are a big deal. More and more men are testing right now than ever before with lower levels of testosterone. There's a lot of speculation of why that is, but we really don't know 100% why men have less testosterone now than they have in previous generations. But it could be that he's low in testosterone and just needs some hormone replacement therapy. But there are a lot of layers that impact libido, and pick those apart and see what you can do to alleviate some of them.
Perfect answer. I think that kind of goes along with this one as well. She says, I have no libido after having my 2 kids. Most of the time we have sex because I know it's good for our relationship, but I can go ages without sex and not care. This other person says, my husband wants to schedule sex, but this doesn't sound fun to me. In fact, it sounds like another task on my endless to-do list. Any advice? So yeah, in your last
Lots of
answer,
advice.
you were like, this is normal. These are the stages of life we are in. So what do we do?
Well, first of all, I would not do duty sex. Anytime you're doing sex because you think it's a job that you have, you're doing more damage to your relationship than blessing it. Your intentions might be that you're blessing it, but actually what is really happening is you're becoming resentful of sex, and you're becoming more resentful of your husband because you have to do this for him. And resentment is always housed in self-betrayal. And so when you think, what is it about yourself in choosing to do this that you're betraying? There are a lot of things I can think of that you need more sleep right now than you need to be doing this. And I'm tired. Does he not see my needs? You can see how this resentment can just become a problem. So I think duty sex doesn't build bridges to each other. It kind of builds a wall between the two of you. I think you can have a plan of sexual bridging is something I think is important, where if you're busy with kids, getting them down for the night, and then just going to the bedroom expecting to have sex, do something between the two. Do something get in the shower together and turn on some music and dance, or just talk a little bit, or maybe just have a massage and see what happens after that. But do some type of sexual bridging between the two, so that it starts being more you're choosing to be there because you're feeling this connection through the bridging. As far as scheduling sex is concerned, early on in my graduate work, we were really encouraged as sex therapists to help our couples schedule sex. And what I found personally through the course of my career is that you'd have the high desire partner whistling through the day, I'm going to get it tonight, and then the low desire partners at home thinking, crap, I got to show up tonight, right? And so it actually made this more of an issue than it needed to. And so what I really encourage couples to do is instead schedule just intimate time to be together. Like you've got a couple of hours where maybe what you'd actually do is eat something and fall asleep naked and then wake up and end up making love, or not, or just having a fun cuddle time naked. But scheduling intimate time, it's a little bit like going to a restaurant. You're going to eat, but you're not sure what it is you're going to eat. And you go and you've got this menu to kind of choose from. If you schedule 2 to 3 hours of time to be together, don't make it about the sex. Make it about the intimate connection, and then see what happens. But have a few ideas. Jeff, my husband, he's such a romantic, and he will often give me menus, like a menu of what I have options to do for the day when we have a day, or when we're making love, what would I like? You can create a lot of fun menus for each other that way. I think it's important to schedule the time and then just kind of see what unfolds rather than scheduling sex.
Yeah, instead of putting so much pressure.
Right.
Schedule it as connection, time to be together. Okay, before we go into talking about raising children and talking to them about sex, I received this question and I'm curious what your thoughts are. She said, having saved sex for marriage, I can't help but wonder if I had experience, would I have a better sex life in my marriage now? Having already learned what I like, already had any awkward experiences, and be satisfied with one person the rest of my life.
Well, I think that's has a lot of layers to that question. It sounds almost like she's regretting waiting. And I think choosing to wait to be sexually active till marriage has a lot more to do with your covenants than it has to do with actually sex, the quality of sex that you're going to have. And so if you can reframe that to, I chose to wait because it was important for me. I understand that sex is intended to be shared in a marriage relationship. That's at least according to our knowledge and understanding of the plan of happiness. And so reframing that to, why did you choose to wait? And then better just seems like such a word that needs some context to it. Better than who, better than what you're having now, better than what you think your neighbors are having. I mean, there's so many, I just need more context with that. So I think the thoughts I had about this question is to have better sex with the person you're with right now and moving forward in the future is where our focus needs to be. We can't do anything about the past other than learn from it, right? And so, first of all, you need to have a better relationship with yourself. Make sure that you are doing some things that create good, replenishing energy for yourself. A lot of the latest research on couple and marital happiness includes as the number 2 thing that couples need is to have time apart, doing things that they find rejuvenating to each of them as individuals. I love that. You don't want to be so enmeshed that you have to do everything together and you kind of lose yourself in all of it. It's also important that it's not all about me. Either, but make sure that there are things, if there's something you're really excited to learn, take a class, do a certain hike, whatever it is, make sure that you work together as a team so that you both have time to rejuvenate. My husband likes to golf. I make sure he golfs all the time because it makes him so happy. Then a better relationship between the two of you. And I mentioned this earlier, but if you want to have better sex, the best thing you can do is increase the trustworthiness in your relationship. Increase the fact that you do what you say you're going to do and that you show up emotionally for your spouse. Those are the 2 ways that trustworthiness is built. So if your spouse is feeling emotional some way, you check in and say, help me understand what's going on. That's trustworthiness. If you say you're going to be home 6 o'clock, you try to get there at 6 o'clock, or you text that I'm on my way, or you make sure you're communicating that you do what you say you're going to do. The more trustworthiness builds, the more freedom you have to be sexually expensive. It is, especially for women, it is not wise to be in a relationship with someone you can't trust. It's really not wise to be in a relationship sexually with someone you can't trust. And so talk about how can I emotionally connect with you more, and how can I truly show up better in doing what I say I'm going to do. And then your relationship sexually will just be so expansive and exciting as you work together on building the trust. I believe that. I've seen that in my practice all the time. I was working with a couple for a while, and they've been married 20, 25 years, and he's always wanted to kind of do anal play, and she's not wanted to do that at all. And through the course of their marriage, when they've been together sexually, sometimes he gets so aroused, he just starts touching her there, and it makes her so frustrated because she feels violated, and she is her body.
Because she's communicated.
Yeah, and she's communicated, I don't want that. And so that has really restricted the trust that she feels about him this way. So when we were meeting for the first time about this issue, I said, dude, you've got to show up. If she says hands off, it's hands off. It's her body. You need to respect that, and you need to show up that you're a trustworthy guy. Well, we continued to meet here and there, and about 6 or 7 months later, I just saw such a significant shift in their relationship, and I just said, I need to know what's going on. And she said right off, he has not touched me there since we had that session 6 or 7 months ago. And I, all of a sudden, want to try it.
Wow.
And you know what? I like it.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So the way to really get the sex that you're wanting together is you have to show up for each other in really trustworthy ways and emotionally bonding ways.
Okay, that leads into a good question, because a lot of people wanted to know what's off limits, and if there's something in our faith that says no to things like sex toys, oral, anal. I got all of the questions, Tammy, and you're the person to ask. I mean,
I get those questions often too, and I'm glad that people feel safe asking, Lauren. That's a great community you've created here. So as far as any church policy, there's 2 church policies on sexuality. One is that sex is intended to be shared between a man and a woman who are married. And 2, the the idea of not using pornography in your life for any reason whatsoever. And so,
oh, that's good that you brought that up, because I got that question too. People asking if they could use pornography during sex.
yeah, I want to talk about that.
And there is
too.
a policy on it.
There absolutely pornographies should be not utilized. And so other than that, I really tell couples all the time, it's up to you. If you got that trustworthiness piece, that makes fantasy so dang fun. It's so exciting to feel that you have so much complete safety with this person that you're willing to expose yourself in ways that, I'm not saying expose yourself in ways that are untrue to you.
Yes, you don't have to do everything.
Right. That are, but exposing yourself in, one of my most favorite things to do is role play. And so every once in a while I'll create a date where we meet up like we're total strangers at some place and we just flirt, and then I trap him to come to my bedroom in a hotel, and it's
so
like
fun.
So,
did you watch Modern Family?
I love that.
They
Those
do
are
it
my
every
favorite.
Valentine's Day.
Yes, I love that with them.
I love it.
So I love doing that. Jeff was very resistant to this at first. It made him so uncomfortable. He didn't want to feel like he was cheating in any way. And so for that, I just needed to be still and say, it's something I think that we could have a lot of fun with, and it exposes a new part of ourselves to each other where we're really playful and unique way. We're all of a sudden a new personality that's showing up for a few hours to each other, and that's kind of takes a lot of courage to do that, right? Even with this person you love, and so there's so many ways that he has started wanting to do this more, and I've seen parts of his personality come to life that I don't think I ever would have seen if we hadn't done this type of play.
Okay, and what I'm hearing from your last answer as well is that to get to a place where you're comfortable and confident and engaging in different, spicing it up in whatever way, it takes trust.
Mm-hmm, totally. And I want to reiterate, because Gottman, he's a leading researcher on marriage in the world, and John Gottman, and he says there's a difference between trust and trustworthiness. Trust, you can trust that they're not going to ever hurt you, they're going to take care of the kids, they're going to, all those kinds of things. Trustworthiness is the piece within the marriage context, and there's two components to that. You show up emotionally for each other, and you do what you say you're going to do.
Okay, I love that.
And so it's the trustworthiness that we need to expand in order for the relationship sexually to grow and become more creative.
Okay, so loud and clear, nothing's off the table.
I want to talk about porn for a minute, though.
Yeah, we should.
You talked a little bit about people asking, is it okay to use porn in marriage? And do you know that early on in sex therapy programs, they were encouraging couples that had problems sexually to view porn together to bless their relationship sexually. And in 2016, John Gottman came out with a statement that is so clear, and I love it. And it goes right along with what the brethren have told us forever, that pornography is not going to bless your marriage. But he said in 2016, and we can unconditionally conclude that porn poses serious threat to couple intimacy and relationship harmony. It acts as a super normal stimulus, which leads to lack of desire for sex with one's partner. It leads to porn-induced erectile dysfunction. I totally would not recommend viewing porn together to meet his needs or to try to spice things up in any way. It's so important to live with integrity, especially when we talk about this trustworthiness piece. If you do what you say you believe in, and you live aligned with what you believe in, this shouldn't be part of who you are.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't imagine, like you talk about not having ghosts in the room, I can't imagine having porn in the room. Like, that sounds like the worst kind of people to invite in my bedroom.
100%. There's so many times I've had little brides come into therapy where their husband's viewing porn while she's performing oral sex on him, and I think what a disrespect for her completely. Absolutely no connection going on there. It is so selfish what he's demanding from her, And I think that pornography is not going to bless your life. It just won't.
Yeah, that is heartbreaking to hear.
It is so hard.
I'm glad they have you. They're coming to you for help. Okay, now let's conclude with some questions about teaching your children. I loved this one. I feel like it sums it up well. She says, how do I teach my kids, especially my daughter, to be more sex positive while still following the teachings of the church? Modesty, masturbation, sex before marriage, etc. I have a hard time finding the middle ground.
I love this question. So thoughtful. I wanted to say that last summer I developed a 10-lesson course on teaching sexual truth for parents. It's available on my website, tammyhill.com. You can go, each lesson's about an hour and a half to 2 hours in length, where I talk about teaching infants, teaching toddlers, teaching every age group, along with principles and our theology. It was a labor of love doing that, but I think it's the most comprehensive that I'm aware of. It's the most comprehensive resource that you have for teaching sexual principles to your children within an LDS context. So, okay, first of all, I love her body for what it can do more than what it looks like. I think the more that we can focus on, doesn't this feel so good? Doesn't this taste so good? Can you hear that? Focus on things that our bodies do rather than what our daughters look like. That's huge. Having a relationship with your child, with your daughter in this instant, with all of your children, is essential. The parents who have a positive relationship with their children postpone their sexual debut by an average of 4 years.
Wow.
That's the biggest predictor to postponing having sex.
Is the relationship
relationship that they have with their parents.
With both parents, or is the father heavier than... Does it matter? It doesn't matter.
It didn't. In the research, it didn't specify. It just talked about parental relationships being such an important factor. We do know that girls' relationships with their fathers, as they grow into teenage and adolescence, that they have better relationships, dating relationships, healthier dating relationships than those girls that don't have a father or don't have a good relationship with their father.
Okay.
So your relationship is huge. I think give her opportunities to experience joy in her body. Is it horseback riding? Is it learning to do a new skill? Creating stained glass window, whatever. Let her experience joy in her body, creating positive energy in her body. I think that's such an important thing for us to allow all of our children to do. Girls in particular tend to be so with the messaging around bodies in the U.S. With females is so damaging. And so the more that you can give her opportunities to experience such joy and happiness living and doing things with her body, the better it will be. As far as modesty, I believe, is about respect for yourself and for the other people that you're with. It's two parts. That doesn't mean that you have to feel like you have to dress a certain way to control other people's thoughts. That's not what I'm saying. But we need to take into context that other people are around, and we need to be respectful of the people that we're with. I just really think it's important for our daughters to understand they're not responsible for other people's thoughts. Unfortunately, they've been taught that. I was taught that. But that they do need to take into consideration that the way they dress shows respect for themselves, and it shows that they respect the environment that they're going to be in. Masturbation. I don't know if you want to hear really what I think about this, but I think we should just chill out about masturbation. We have had so many unhealthy messages throughout the years from church leadership around masturbation. My number one download of podcasts, over 500,000 downloads on this one podcast on Live Your Way, is on masturbation. And it went kind of viral. It's my most viral one. Went viral around church leadership. Bishops from all over the world were sending me messages thanking me for the information in that podcast of normalizing that, you're not bad when you touch yourself. It's not the best thing to focus on touching yourself and teaching principles that this should be something shared in marriage and exciting to say for marriage, but that they're a bad person or in any way damning for doing something that I think is kind of just happens sometimes.
Yeah, like it can be natural to happen, but it doesn't need to be something that you feel shame. I mean, I don't know. That's a complicated one.
Well, I always like to go back to principles, Lauren, that sex is intended for a relationship. When you're masturbating, are you in a relationship? And no, you're alone, and it's not something that's going to be helpful in relationships. One thing I do in my work often is help couples learn how to have sex when one or both partners have been masturbating to porn, because they've figured out their individual pacing and everything that they particularly like, and then they're coming together trying to do this in a relationship, and it doesn't work. And so you're becoming very selfish when you're choosing to spend so much time this way on yourself, and I don't think it helps you feel better about yourself. I don't think it helps you expand and grow and learn new, exciting things. I think it can become a habit-forming practice.
Yeah, can I actually ask another question? I know we're talking about kids, but I want to go back to masturbation. Someone asked me, they said, like, my husband has to masturbate sometimes because he gets so stressed and anxious and wound up. And, like, she's like, we don't know how to feel about that, if we should feel bad about that.
Well, I think if she's with him, if she wants to offer to do a hand job, I think that we share one another's burdens. I don't want it to be something that she feels like routinely. She has to do.
Yeah.
It can be, maybe it's night and he's really feeling like he would like to have a release, and he talks to her, would you be willing to help me relieve my stress, and make it about a relationship more than he's off doing this on his own.
Yeah, it goes back to the replenish. Mm-hmm. Like, you work with each other to help
and it
each
could
other.
Be something that you actually kind of find is fun once in a while. It's more all about him for a minute. And then as women, we tend to be more about giving, and so it's kind of fun just to focus on him and then not feel so messed up in our heads that we relax and let him just focus on us. Yeah. Right? It can kind of be something that we share that way.
Yeah, that's good advice. I like that. Okay, going back to the question about teaching our kids, we want to be sex positive, but we don't want to encourage them to have sex.
Right. So what does sex mean? I like to go back to the meanings. What does it mean to you to share that part of yourself with someone? What's underneath the meaning is there needs to be some type of requirement for you to want to do this with someone, right? Some type of alignment, some way that you, for your core self, to align so that you would feel like this was good for you to share this with someone else. So help me understand what sex means to you. I think there's a lot of consequences to behavior, and not in a preachy way, but to just sit down like we're sitting here and say, if you become sexually active with your boyfriend, what might be some of the consequences to that? Yeah. And what can I do to help you understand that I want you to be happy? I want you to feel successful and to know yourself.
Yeah, I think honest about the consequences, but also the blessings of like, well, this is why I waited. And let me tell you about my experience with dating. And because I think if we just focus on the negative, that there might not be as much of an appeal to wait. Like I'm capable of getting on birth control and not getting pregnant, you know what I mean? But the connection in a relationship.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up, and that's a really good, important thing to do too. I think just that it goes all back to that relationship piece, don't you think? The relationship you have with your child is going to be the number one determinant of how they choose to manage their sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Well, any other thoughts that we have to close out? I could ask another question about kids.
Oh, I was going to say, I do have 2 children's books, too, that might be helpful. God Made Girls and Boys is a little one for younger children, talking a little bit about boys and girls and the plan of happiness and understanding their purpose in life. And then last year I put out the graphic illustrated novel. We did an Instagram live on that, Your Body and the Plan of Happiness. I've had such a good response to that. A lot of parents have been very grateful for that book.
Yeah, highly recommend the resources that Tammy has. And so that's the good news, is if you want more and you feel like your questions weren't answered, go to Tammy's website and find her on social media. I also feel like you're so good. I don't know how you'll be able to do this on your mission as much, but on social media, I feel like you're really good at answering questions, and you do Q&As all the time. Mm-hmm. So if we didn't get to your question, go find Tammy and go get onto one of her Q&As, because they're really good.
I do answer those. I think it's important to it's not very many places that I'm aware of that you can ask someone that has the same kind of standards or values that you have about this topic and feel like you're getting an answer that you trust.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being here and joining me today.
It's been so fun, Lauren. You're adorable.
Thanks. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. I love you, and I hope that you have the best weekend. Bye.